If you're in the market for a luxury home here in South Florida, you're probably asking yourself this question. Do I go to Pinecrest or do I go to Coral Gables? On paper, both these communities might look similar. They have big lots, they have beautiful homes, they have gorgeous streets. But here's what most people don't know about these two amazing communities, is that your daily life can be almost completely opposite. So it all really depends on what exactly you're looking for. Is it walkability? Are you looking for restaurants and shop? Do you want to be near downtown? Are you looking for a little bit more of a quiet suburban life where maybe the soccer fields are better and they have better activities for the kids? These are all things that we have to think about when we talk about these two communities. Today, we're going to break down all things Pinecrest and Coral Gables and how they compare, whether it's on investment on your daily life and how you choose to enjoy these communities. Let's get into it. I'm Riley Smith and I'm born right here in South Florida. Been living here for 58 years. For the last 25 of those years, I've been specializing in luxury real estate in Miami, specializing particularly in Pinecrest, Coral Gables, Coconut Grove area. So this is going to be a really insightful little journey we're going to take through these two communities. Before we get into the stats and all the different breakdowns of these two communities, first, if you just get in your car and take a drive. I'm a big believer of just driving through communities. You get a sense of how different they are or how similar they are, and you get to really get a feel for what's going on there. So let's just start with take a drive through Pinecrest and Coral Gables, and I can promise you'll surely see the differences right away. Some of the immediate differences that you'll notice right away. Coral Gables, certainly in different pockets, can be a lot more dense. A lot of the areas of Coral Gables, maybe outside of the gated communities, are going to have houses that are a little bit closer to each other. The lots are not going to be quite as big. But immediately when you get into Pinecrest, the first thing you notice is the lot sizes. The houses are much more spread apart. The size of the land is a lot bigger. It already gives it a totally different feel. It feels much more like a drivable town than maybe a walkable town that something like Coral Gables might feel like. The layout and the feel of each neighborhood impacts your first impression all the time. The tricky part is Coral Gables is so massive and it covers so many different facets. Whether you've got gated communities, whether you've got North Gables where the lots are tiny, you've got the old Spanish homes. But I think immediately you feel in Coral Gables, you'll feel the foliage, you'll feel the trees, the lushness, and immediately looking at some of the homes, you can feel the history that's behind what's going on in Coral Gables. As when you get into Pinecrest, it's a totally different feel, right? Pinecrest was developed much later on. It was a big boom in the 50s and then has been renovated and renovated and renovated ever since. So you have a very different sense of community there. The foliage is not as much. You see a lot more grass. Sometimes some of these yards, they even look like soccer fields, which if you live in Coral Gables, you know is almost hard to find or if not impossible to find. If you're looking at the two communities, you can quickly tell which one is a little bit more of a planned out community and which one developed organically, right? If you look at Pinecrest from an aerial view, you're going to notice it's a perfect grid. You got the streets are going in certain directions. You've got the wide sidewalks. You got all the things that sort of look like a more planned community because that's what it was as it started to develop in the 50s. If you look at, of course, Coral Gables, you've got a little bit of everything, right? Because Coral Gables, let's go all the way back to the early 1900s when we started there. And every sort of 10 years, we have a different generation of building that's come in. So we have so much more variety of homes in Coral Gables and has a completely different vibe. One of the things I've learned after 25 years is the value of being in the car, as I mentioned. When I'm with clients and we go through the two neighborhoods, they usually immediately gravitate towards one or the other. It's really important as realtors to listen to the buyers and understand what is their gut reaction to the areas that they're seeing. Like which one speaks to them. And quite often you can't tell until you get in the car and go take a look. This is where your everyday life changes. Are you getting in a car to drive just about everywhere to do anything? Or are you going to have the ability to stroll down the street and wander into a neighborhood cafe or shop or just sort of get to a park or anything close like that? I think if you look at these two communities side by side and say, what does a typical day in the life of Pinecrest look like versus a day in life of Coral Gables? You're going to have completely different answers. Let's start with Coral Gables. It's got a thriving downtown. Thousands and thousands of people are flooding into downtown every day to go to work. You've got high rises, all kinds of things up and down Miracle Mile and in the surrounding areas there. You've also got many, many schools. Coral Gables also has so many different pockets that look differently and have different access points and different challenges. If you swing over to Pinecrest, all looks a little similar. You have the North Pinecrest and the South Pinecrest, and of course they have their schools and their fields, but you just notice that everything is so much more spread out. You have so much more space. You're not on top of your neighbors. And I think you're now, especially, we're starting to see with the size of the lots, all this new development that you cannot possibly miss. It looks like somebody's building something on every block at Pinecrest. People always ask me, if I go to Pinecrest, am I getting my car for everything? And pretty much the answer is yes. There's certain pockets that you can maybe ride your bike and get into South Miami, or you can get to the community center or get down down, to some of the farmers markets and things like that. For the most part, you want a cup of coffee in Pinecrest, you're going to get in your car, or if you have a golf cart, that might just work. I think when people are looking at these two communities and trying to figure out the lifestyles, I think they have to look at how they've lived before maybe, or how their new current situation has changed, right? I do see a lot more people gravitating towards Pinecrest because of the size of the lot. They do have amazing schools. It just seems like you get a little bit more for your money down there. But I think if you're looking at Coral Gables, of course, then it's a whole different vibe. So if you look at Coral Gables, I think you have people that are becoming a little bit more attracted to the walkability of Coral Gables, which is something fairly new. For a long time, we really didn't use those words with Coral Gables. You could drive there very quickly or close by, but now Coral Gables has really got a lot going on the center of the Gables, and it's expanding out and more opportunities to have walkability. When we work with buyers, one thing I always like to figure out is, are they going to prioritize lifestyle, or are they going to prioritize maybe what their individual home is going to look like, and is that the most important piece? Quite often the people that end up in Pinecrest, and a lot of my friends are down there now, families are expanding, they're looking for bigger lots, they're looking for a little more privacy, they don't want to be on top of each other, and they want to get down there for the fantastic public schools and even some of the great private schools. And it has a different kind of feel to it, where you are a little bit in suburbia, but you can get a much bigger house in a much bigger lot than you can in Coral Gables. And on the other flip side, I notice people that are attracted to Coral Gables a lot because of its history and its charm and its character. Also, I think because of its location, it's a little closer to downtown Miami and everything else that's happening in the city, and maybe the airport is important to them, or they just want to be in a community that has a little more diversity and a little more energy happening. This is a deal breaker for a lot of people. Can I walk to a restaurant, or do I have to jump in my car and drive 15 minutes just to get a bite to eat? Because this is one of those things that sounds small, but when you're really living there, it's something that really separates the two between Pinecrest and Coral Gables. If you're going to pick your community based on the restaurant scene that is very easily accessible and where you don't have to leave your town, you're 100% going to gravitate towards Coral Gables. Coral Gables has had an emergence of restaurants, and we've got restaurants up and down the Miracle Mile Quarter, we've got restaurants over at Merrick Park, and now everywhere in between with everything that's happening on Ponce. So the restaurant scene in Coral Gables, because it's a business center, because they attract so many people in the daytime, has really bloomed and blossomed into something pretty amazing, and we're getting some top-notch chefs moving in here. Now, if you look at the restaurant scene in Pinecrest, it's a very different scene. It's a lot more mom and pop. You've got to drive in your car over to US 1. Most of everything is up and down the US 1 corridor, right? You've got roasters and toasters, and you've got barbecue joints, and you got some small places here and there, but you're not really going to get that vibrant scene where you have a lot of new fantastic chefs coming in. I just think that those people are gravitating towards cities here like Coconut Grove and Coral Gables, where the city centers have attracted so many more people, and where you don't have to get in your car to go to a restaurant. So if you're looking at the Gables, some of my favorite restaurants would be the Sapiro Wine Bar, one of my favorite places, locally owned, awesome guy. You want a good glass of Italian wine. I just had the lasagna there the other day, highly recommend it. I mean, of course you can't go wrong at Hillstones. That's an iconic staple right there on the corner of Miracle Mile and Ponce. Mika is another amazing Italian restaurant. The beauty of Coral Gables is right now, there is something for everyone, whether you just want to dash and grab something quickly, or if you want to go and sit down and have a nice romantic meal, or maybe even want to have a party in a restaurant. There's so many options in Coral Gables. I think a hard question to answer is, how much does this all factor into when you talk about resale value? And I think the resale value of both these communities is very different. I think the Coral Gables resale value has always been very steady and slowly growing over time as the community's gotten bigger and better and more improvements are happening. Where if you look at the resale value of Pinecrest, it's gone through a lot of different waves. And right now we're really looking at what is the effect of all of this development that's being built right now to meet a new buyer demand who's looking for a new kind of home, right? 2 stories, high ceilings, big, almost like these white boxes that we talk about, are going up on every corner down there. And so resale value there is a little trickier. I think in Pinecrest, you have to be careful. You have to time the market. Right now, I think there's something like 75 houses on the market over $7 million. We didn't have any of that kind of inventory 5 years ago. So I think depending on when you have to sell, you would have a lot harder time picking the right time in Pinecrest, where in Coral Gables, since I've been doing this for 25 years, except for the great crash, there's never really been a bad time to put your house on the market. So this next one is a little subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. These two communities could not have been more opposite in how they were designed. So let's start with Coral Gables, of course, one of the original cities in all of Miami. Started out with a real small center up by the Biltmore Hotel and all around what I would call Coral Way area, and slowly but surely expanded out. Now you have to remember, Coral Gables is a giant piece of property when you look at the land from a map, right? All the way up from A Street, all the way down to the water, going super falls south, and then coming all the way up to Lejeune Road. So Coral Gables was sort of organically planned And it's those two words don't always go together. But the Gables has always been very careful with their building codes and how they let things happen and how they let things develop. And you can see that even today when you see new buildings going up in Coral Gables, they want to make sure they stay and look in the traditional sense of Coral Gables. And then as you get out of the center of Coral Gables, you get into the residential neighborhoods. Again, they're very careful with their building codes, making sure that everything kind of stays very similar. If we look at Pinecrest, of course, Pinecrest was developed sort of out of a need in the 50s. They put up a ton of these one-story houses on these big lots that was really undeveloped, untapped territory back then, and it was just ripe for massive development. So a lot of houses went up fast that look very, very similar. Now you fast forward to Pinecrest and see the development. Everything has changed. With so many people coming here and looking for lots and just getting away from the density of the city, Pinecrest has been the go-to suburb for things like that. And you can see it in their planning, how they've grown. They are a little more open to letting people build bigger homes and different style homes down there. And so it does have a different feel. And right now, certainly with all the construction going on there, it has a totally new vibe happening in Pinecrest. In Coral Gables, one of the things that impacts the lifestyle and the vibe of Coral Gables is how tightly they regulate the zoning and building codes there. There are a lot of historical things in there. If you're renovating your home and you're changing the feel of it, it has to fit with what they have as a plan for that community. And that plan has been around for over 100 years. Because of that, the lifestyle has stayed very consistent. The only thing that has really changed is that the downtown area has really taken off. That's brought in more people, and then of course the walkability that we talk about. In Pinecrest, it was designed to be a suburb. It was always going to be a suburb. They were never going to have this beautiful city center that the entire community was built around. They were just going to build a lot of houses fast, and there was vast tracts of land that were undeveloped back in the day. Because they didn't take the time to think about it, you don't have a proper village or center of town that sort of everybody gravitates towards, and that the community began in the middle and then worked its way out. So now they've had to sort of come up with secondary options for that lifestyle, which does mean you probably got to get in that car, get down up and down the US 1 corridor, and that's where you're seeing strip mall after strip mall acting as a city center for Pinecrest. So there are sidewalks everywhere. Like, that's how you know you're in Coral Gables. You're on a sidewalk. One of the things people notice when we're doing our drive arounds in these communities is how people are outside walking differently. In Pinecrest, you're gonna notice the streets are big and wide, the lots are huge, the houses are set way back, and generally I see the foot traffic walking up and down the streets, trying to get to the quieter streets when you see them walking the babies or walking the dog or out for a jog or riding a bike. You go over the other side and you get to Coral Gables, which is 90% of Coral Gables has got sidewalks. And that's how you know you're in Coral Gables. Those little white signs on the bottom of the sidewalk on every turn, totally different than the street signs the rest of Miami has. But for the most part, Coral Gables was designed for everybody to walk on the sidewalk, and you do notice it. The people walking their dogs, walking their babies, everyone else, maybe not the joggers and the bikers, but it does feel so much safer probably to be walking in Coral Gables because you don't have to really walk in the road in most of Coral Gables. When you look at how the two communities are designed, there is an impact on their long-term viability. I think Coral Gables was very thoughtful about their decisions. They were starting over 100 years ago, but they really thought about how they were going to bring in the trolleys and the transits and how people were going to maneuver and around Coral Gables when there wasn't much else in all of Miami. If you look at how Pinecrest was designed, again, it was designed to be a very, very, very residential kind of suburb community where everybody was going to get in their car, drive good 30, 45 minutes to downtown on a good day, driving 15 minutes to the grocery store. But when they were home, they were in a sense of a neighborhood that had a different feel because everything was so big and the lots were bigger. So when you're there with your kids and your family, the feel of Pinecrest feels very different. Your homes are bigger, your lots are bigger. What I'm finding is that people build differently there so that they don't have to go out. You're gonna find more big homes have their own gyms, so you don't have to go to the gym. You're gonna find more things in the yard for the kids to do, so you don't have to go to different places like that. But I think there's just very different aspects of the two that help in the design elements. What's interesting about these two communities is once people settle in, they seem to settle in for a very long time. My friends have moved down to Pinecrest. A lot of them went down there when they had younger kids, and they stayed and stayed and stayed until the kids went off to college. What you notice in Pinecrest particularly is if you have kids, it is an amazing community. They got incredible community centers. The public schools are fantastic. I mentioned the roads are wide, their streets are beautiful. You also have these great backyards. And so the home becomes the hub. People really start to appreciate that the more they live in there. And they must appreciate it a lot because some of the people have to drive an hour to get downtown for work every day, and they still want to stay down there. You usually don't see them leaving unless they're leaving town or the kids are finally gone and they're starting to downsize. Whereas the Gables, people appreciate the Gables differently now than they did before because of the walkability and all of the new things that have come into the center of Gables. It's added a whole different different dimension to living in Coral Gables. Let's take a minute and talk about the buyer demographics. This is a question I always get when I'm talking to buyers who are not sure where to go. Start with Coral Gables. Really hard to narrow down one specific demographic for Coral Gables. Coral Gables has everything. We've got $100 million mansions on the water, all the way up to tiny little old Spanish up by A Street, and everything in between. We've got apartments, we've got townhouses, we've got condos, we've got office buildings. So the demographic in the Gables is such a hard thing to nail down. There's something for young families, old families, downsizers, out-of-towners, part-timers. And so I would say that for me would be a really hard answer to give you. What is the type of buyer going to Coral Gables? Only because it is so incredibly diverse. The Pinecrest side, it's a little easier. I am sure that most people thinking about buying in Pinecrest have a family, have kids, and maybe even have a larger family. How the size of the house and the size of the lot, and you get so much more for your money down there. And it does feel like it's a little bit out of the rat race. So I think you can easily say, and I'm not supposed to say this probably, but more families would generally probably be heading towards Pinecrest if they're looking for size and they're looking for space and they're looking to get away from the hustle and bustle of Coral Gables. Of course, right now you can't talk about buyers without talking about relocation buyers. Relocation buyers are something that is fueling our economy right now. They're not coming as much from South America as they used to. Right now, they're mostly coming from these big cities all over America. We are seeing it impact the communities in two different ways. If you look at Pinecrest right now, there are a lot of people coming into Pinecrest that are looking for that new build. And the developers have been building as fast as humanly possible to come up with brand new construction homes one at a time to meet the needs. That is a place we see a lot of people who are coming from different parts and different suburbs and big cities where they had a lot of land around them and they had a big house. And they can't really find that in Coral Gables. That's not very attainable. So I think that is driving the Pinecrest resurgence and all the construction we're seeing there. These out-of-town buyers, they want new, they want big, they want flashy, and they also want a beautiful lot. Towards Coral Gables, and you see people going there, I think it's people who are a little bit more concerned about the commute to work. Maybe you're also looking for people that don't need as big of a home or big of a lot. There's still a group of people I think appreciate the old world charm that Coral Gables has done a fantastic job at maintaining. The migration wave has definitely changed the vibe in Pinecrest more than anywhere else. As I was a kid growing up in Pinecrest, there were tons of families there, but it was not as upscale as it has now. This new wave of people have brought massive amount of money. You can't help but see a Land Rover on every corner. Everything looks different. The houses are bigger. They're much more expensive. Prices in Pinecrest have gone crazy in the last few years, and that is mostly to meet the demand of this new buyer. Where in the Gables, I don't think you can feel the impact as much. There is an impact, and I think you can really see it where you see the development of more restaurants, more shops, and all of the actual sort of businesses of Coral Gables have really taken off. But if you look at the houses of Coral Gables, because of their building code, lot sizes, how they want to be strict with what you build, we don't see the same development happening in most of Coral Gables. There is some development happening certainly on the water, and certainly if you look at Gables Estates, you don't even recognize it anymore. So I can't say unilaterally that's the case, but I do think that's mostly the case in Coral Gables. For those families with kids, it is sort of a lifestyle choice. It's not just a home choice. I think, yes, the home can be geared a little bit more towards families like we talked about in Pinecrest, but I also think there is a lifestyle. Let's just start with Pinecrest. I think people got on Pinecrest because they love the quietness of it. They love the fact that you can ride your bike around very easily in Pinecrest, not a lot of traffic. You can get you some of the best public schools in all of Miami. And of course, you have Gulliver and some other really good private schools down there as well. So I think they're attracted to that lifestyle. I think it is all about the kid when you're buying in Pinecrest, right? Because you've got just unbelievable amount of things for them to do down there. Versus if you look in Coral Gables, it's a very different vibe. But again, Coral Gables is so big, it's hard to say one way or another because I really think we have something for everybody in Coral Gables. People always ask me about the school options between the two. And the biggest question I have to ask then is like, are you thinking private or are you thinking public? Because if you're thinking private, I think both of them have fantastic private schools. They're both in locations where you can still get to the other great schools, a lot of them up and down the main highway in Coconut Grove. So we are thinking, if you're thinking private, certainly there are several good elementary private schools in Coral Gables. And of course, then you've got Gulliver and some of the other big high schools and junior high schools. If you're thinking public schools, I think most people would agree that probably would tend to head down to Pinecrest. However, they have some really great public schools right here in Coral Gables, Sunset Drive Elementary being one of them. Of course, my alma mater, which we can't forget about, Coral Gables High School, shout out to the class of '86, now has an incredible high-end program there. And then the Coral Gables Elementary is still a fantastic school. So you really, at the end of the day, can't go wrong. Like Pinecrest and the Gables go like this all over the place, depending on what street you're in. One thing we talk a lot about with people when they're coming down here is thinking about what is your daily routine, especially around schools, and maybe where your house is located to those schools, right? One of the things we do have a challenge with is everybody pretty much is coming to these schools by car, right? It's not super communities you see in other places where everybody is walking or taking the bus to get these things. Mostly we're getting there by car. So you have to time your movement around these schools according to when the pickup and drop off lines are. And I do think that has something to do with some of the home values that are either closer or farther farther away. But there are people commuting to the private schools all over Miami. If you live in a public school community, then of course you have to live within a district, and there you are going to see some more walkable. You're going to see the kids riding their bike. But if you're going the private school route, one of the beauties of that is there's no restriction on where you live. Because of that, private school lines are something to be taken seriously. When you talk to parents, when they decide whether they want to be in the Gables or in Pinecrest, they're not necessarily thinking about education or lifestyle. I think they're thinking about a combination package, because both offer very good education and both offer very different lifestyles. If you're thinking about, am I looking at this place for the schools or am I looking for the impact? I think that's an individual choice that each family probably makes. One last thought on schooling. Some people ask me about, does schooling affect demand and pricing? And I will say that certainly in Pinecrest, there is a premium placed on if you are in the right Pinecrest Elementary, Pinecrest Junior High School area, and you have access to that school for free. Versus if you're somewhere else, public school option is not what you're looking for, and you're gonna go the private school route, well, you're looking at a very hefty price tag for our private schools down here. So I do think that plays out in a little bit in home values. When you're thinking about buying a home, so much more goes into it than just how many beds and how many baths and even the location, right? Quite often it is sort of how you are going to be living in the home. But let's start with Pinecrest. I mean, if you think Pinecrest, again, you think big, huge, large, almost like football fields amount of grass that everybody, and you also immediately think indoor, outdoor, but particularly outdoor living. That's where you see homes with tennis courts. Now we're certainly hearing pickleball, although that's quite controversial. You've got basketball courts out there. You've got all kinds of other outdoor activities, because once you get to the house, as we talked about, you don't have as many options outside of the home. So people are making their homes in Pinecrest more like a resort. People who really are into outdoor living with the big summer kitchens and the gazebos and the huge pools, that is something that attracts them there. If you're coming to Coral Gables, it's a little bit different. Our lots are smaller. There's more foliage. You don't have the same amount of sun. You definitely don't have the same amount of grass. Your indoor outdoor living may not be as expansive, but certainly don't get me wrong. Coral Gables has also an amazing indoor outdoor lifestyle. If you want privacy, you're probably going to gravitate towards Pinecrest. Your neighbors are not right on top of you. You can build hedges as high as you want and make your backyards completely private. Where if you're looking in the Gables, you're just going to be a lot more dense. Probably a little bit harder to get privacy. You can use hedges, and both communities have amazing hedges. You can get the privacy in Coral Gables, probably just a little bit harder to find than it is in Pinecrest. One thing people ask me all the time is, do I have to go to Pinecrest if I want a big lot? And the answer is no. There is still some big lots in Coral Gables in certain pockets. If you get away from the north, up north, it's very, very dense, especially around the Biltmore area. If you're on the golf course, some of the lots are big there. If you come to the south, you certainly have bigger lots in the south. And as we go really south, we're running into some gated communities. They did put an emphasis on large lots. The difference is those lots are going to be so much more expensive because they're either on the water or in a gated community. So that's a totally different thing than just having a regular acre lot on an average street in Pinecrest. Hands down, every time, if lot size and outdoor living are what you're looking for, Pinecrest is going to win. It's going to have by far the most options. They've got lots from anywhere from a quarter acre, half acre, 1 acre, 2 acres. So whatever size lot you need to fit your family or whoever's going to be living there, you can find it in Pinecrest. And hands down, that is a hard thing to do in Coral Gables. So how does the land translate into long-term value? I don't really think back in the 50s and 60s when people were building and buying those houses, they really thought they would see the explosion of land value right now that they do, as everybody is looking at Pinecrest to build these big new modern mansions. So it's really hard to tell how it impacts, the value at any given moment in time. I think you have to look at a history in time to say that the big lots certainly had a value that was an add-on to the Pinecrest properties. And since we don't really have that many in the Coral Gables, I don't think we can look at it that way. We probably have to value the homes slightly different. Another big difference between the two, and of course this one comes down to personal taste, is really if you're interested in architecture and what kind of architecture you're going to be surrounded in. If you look at the Coral Gables, of course we have the historic homes that were based and still are based in the Mediterranean style, and that is some of the prevailing architecture there. There are pockets that have the 50s houses that we've talked about because that was such an explosion down here in South Florida. You'll see much more charm, much more character, much more attention to detail, and a lot more smaller homes in Coral Gables. So every other house is a 50s styles house waiting to be torn down, or now it looks like almost this emergence of this modern community. At the rate that they're going, you're not going to recognize Pinecrest from 10 years ago in the next 5 to 10 years, as there's like an arms race to build more, bigger, better, more beautiful, big houses on these gorgeous lots. I do notice lately the buyers that we're looking at don't seem to value architecture as much as it used to be in my career. Most people are thinking about the size of the house, whether it's new or not, and where it's located a lot more than the architecture. Earlier part of my career here in selling real estate in Miami, I did get a lot of people coming saying, I like the architecture of the cute little cottages versus the old Mediterranean houses and things like that. The importance is placed much more on the house itself. Is it the right fit for me and the family? If you drive the two communities, the tear down opportunities and land development is massive in Pinecrest. It's just a lot harder in Coral Gables with the building codes because they're code is so strict, people have maintained their homes so well that there's not really as many tear down opportunities. But if you look down what's happening in Pinecrest, every street, every corner, sometimes every other house, they're tearing them down and building brand new modern houses. And that community is going to completely look different in 5 years. One of the things that holds back the development in the single family market in Coral Gables is the importance that they have placed on the historic value of how the community looked from day one. Little things like you have to have a barrel tile roof because they wanted to stay with the Mediterranean style. You had to have a tile roof. You can't go with shingles. And just recently they started letting people have metal roofs. But they've had so many things in their code and how things have to be built because they've really, really wanted to maintain this sense of one unified community where as you're driving through all the streets of Coral Gables, because of the little street signs, the sidewalks, all the houses are sort of kept the same way, right? They have a lot of rules on fences and hedges and walls, things like that. And you know when you're in Coral Gables, and as soon as you leave, the area looks completely different. People ask me all the time, which aesthetic is going to hold value? And it's really hard to say. I think because Pinecrest is changing fast, are these new modern boxes, are they going to live the test of time? I don't know. But what I do know is that in Coral Gables, some of these very old Mediterranean style homes that have been beautifully restored have lasted for over 100 years. So I would say the test of time is on Coral Gables on that question. Let's talk numbers and strategy when you're thinking about these two communities. When you look at them from a financial standpoint and you're making one of the biggest decisions of your life, there are a lot of factors that have to go into it. If you look at the history of Coral Gables, for one, it has been a very steady, slow, incremental build. Like I said, with really only a dip in that 08, 09, 010 depression that we all went through here in the United States. And then, of course, we hit COVID area, and just like a lot of South Florida, Coral Gables shot up, and now we're back down to where we have that very slow and steady progression. From an investment standpoint, it's a lot less risky to buy in Coral Gables. The way things have historically gone over there and how consistent everything happens there and how everybody has to keep their home to a certain standard helps keep it going up slowly. But because they are not as active in allowing people to develop new properties and there are not as many opportunities, if you're timing the market right, you may miss out on a little boom that you could get if you could have more development. If we flip over, Pinecrest couldn't be more different, right? Pinecrest is ripe with development. If you are timing Pinecrest right, there's a lot of money to be made in a shorter period of time. I don't think the pricing, again, hasn't been around as long as Coral Gables, but the pricing not the same. You have seen a lot more peaks and a lot more valleys happening down there. Again, right now, homeowners in the last couple of years have been approached for an amazing amount of money for their land that nobody could have conceived years ago. And now you're going to have these huge modern houses built all over the place. Will that hold the test of time? It is yet to be seen on the investment front. Depending on your investment strategy, if you're looking for stable, you're going to Coral Gables all day long. If you're looking to hit the market at the right time and make the right investment, and you're looking at maybe this purchase as an investment and not where you're just going to live, then I think you got to try to figure out the timing in Pinecrest. I do believe there is short-term upside in Pinecrest or downside depending on the cycle versus the consistency that we see in Coral Gables. The question people ask me all the time is, where do I see more upside in the next 5 to 10 years in Pinecrest or Coral Gables? Right now, I'm a little worried about Pinecrest. As I mentioned, I think there's a lot of development and there's a lot of new product coming to market. Will it get absorbed with all these new buyers coming here, or they're going to have a little bit of a pause and a hard time selling that? That may cause a short-term dip in Pinecrest. I don't think you can go wrong in either community, but I do think that Coral Gables is probably positioned better with its diversity and with its tradition to continue to grow at a more steady rate. If I had to invest in one of the two communities today, I would say at this very moment, I would stick with Coral Gables. If you had asked me that 5 years ago, it would have been hands down, no question, Pinecrest, because I had seen the writing on the wall 5 years ago that Pinecrest was a place where there was so much development opportunity and that the city of Pinecrest was very pro-development. But now I'm a little worried that the next few years that development is going to catch up to us and we may be saturated with inventory. But right now, the safe bet to me is to find the perfect property in Coral Gables and sit back and enjoy a nice, slow, steady appreciation and not worry about timing the market. But if you're one of those guys that likes to go to Vegas and roll the dice, Pinecrest is definitely going to have its ups and its downs, and there's going to be opportunity there for the right buyer who's very savvy. So every choice comes with a trade-off. All right, if you're choosing Coral Gables over Pinecrest, certainly there are things that are great for Coral Gables and that lifestyle that you probably also wish you had some of the what's over there in Pinecrest, and vice versa. So it's really interesting looking at the two and seeing what are the trade-offs in the lifestyles between which community you decided to call home. With a Pinecrest buyer, the only thing I've ever really heard them talk about regrets was, I do feel a little isolated, right? If I'm working downtown and I drive all the way back down to Pinecrest, which in today's world can take you an hour at any given day, once you're home, do you really want to jump back in the car and run out to the beach for dinner? You really want to go take advantage of what's happening in the Design District, Wynwood, and everything else? So I think you have to plan your days a little differently and plan your exits down there. The main complaint people have, and especially people who've been in Pinecrest forever, is the traffic. I don't think anybody really really fully understands the impact of the traffic, right? We keep expanding our city. We keep growing and building more and more homes up and down this southeast corridor, but we're not building new roads and new access points. And Pinecrest is tough. There's only 2 ways to get there. And you all know it if you've been down there. If you're in the wrong time, it can take a long time to get in or out of Pinecrest. What surprises people the most about Coral Gables, and especially if we continue on talking about traffic patterns, is how easily you can get around in Coral Gables. Coral Gables has got a lot of different options to move you around, how quick you can get to downtown, get to the airport, come to the Grove, South Miami. All of these things are really, really accessible. So if you're looking at it from a traffic pattern standpoint, there's also just so many different arteries into the Gables. The Gables is so vast, it depends on what section of the Gables we're talking about. But in general, it's just easier to get around in Coral Gables. A buyer can think about, am I looking for busy or am I looking for quiet? Certainly, if you're looking for quiet, you're going to go to Pinecrest. You might go to some of the southern parts of Coral Gables as well. If you're looking for hustle and bustle, the other side of US 1, where Coral Gables, all the city center and Merrick Park and everything happening around there, I think that city has become so vibrant and so full of life today. And now it's not just during the daytime when everybody's working there, but it's what's happening at night. All the new restaurants, all the new shops, the Giraldo Walkway, all the things going on there now, certainly up and down Pont, are bringing a lot more people into the Gables that don't even live in the Gables. So if you're looking for that hustle and bustle, I think the Gables has that, but you can also get away and get quiet. If you're looking for quiet and quiet and quiet, you're going to go to Pinecrest. There is no hustle and bustle anywhere in Pinecrest. In conclusion, I think when you're comparing Coral Gables and Pinecrest, you can't go wrong. They are both amazing places to live. You just have to understand how you want to live and what part of the lifestyle that you're really looking for. As we talked about ad nauseum, Coral Gables has a lot more going on. It's much more of a diverse community, all kind of different architectures, all kind of different walkability, shops, restaurants, and everything else, and probably closer to a lot of other things in Miami. And if you're just trying to get away a little, and when you get home, you want to have that nice, quiet, residential feel, Pinecrest is absolutely the place for you. Or maybe you're just someone who enjoys having a much bigger backyard and that great outdoor living space. So many great activities, so many little hidden gems that you can find in the neighborhood. You can get to the parks, you can get to the library, you can get to the farmers market, which is awesome. Both communities have so much going on in so many different ways, and it just depends on what you as the individual buyer are looking for. So if you're trying to decide which one's the right choice for you and you want more help from me, drop a comment below or just give me a call and I'm happy to discuss it with you at any given time. As I said, they're both amazing communities. So if you've enjoyed this and you want more breakdowns of other parts of Miami, you have to subscribe to our channel below. I'll catch you on the next one.